Thank you. One sec. All right. I'm ready.
Okay. And then here's that button if
Thank
you
you.
want, or you can just use the arrows.
Okay. Thank you so much, Kim. That was fun and true. And thank you, everyone, for coming today and sharing this coffee with me. I had a lot. Yeah, as she said, I am Jenna Blazevich. I have a design studio here in town called Craft, and I'm a graphic designer by trade. She said a lot of it, but I specialize in lettering. And primarily, I apply my lettering to logo types and branding design for small businesses. But something else notable about me is that I'm super scared to be here today. And I think I kind of specialize in being scared and figuring out how to harness it. Because sharing your work in any environment is absolutely terrifying to a number of different degrees. But the only reason that I'm able to be here today and talk about my work like, confidently in front of this community is because I've tried to make sure that throughout my whole career that I'm in touch with what really drives me to create so that the things that I'm making are things that I can really stand behind. And at first, these things that I felt most confident about and passionate about were the things that I was making for myself, because obviously you're not going to be commissioned to make your dream project possibly ever, but definitely not at the beginning. So those are self-initiated projects for sure. And then as I kind of like grew as an artist, I started to open up my circle of people that I felt comfortable sharing my work with to my loved ones and the people that I cared about. And then through doing that for a number of years, got more comfortable with the idea of sharing my work with people who I admired and the people who are my mentors. And then that brings me to today, where I'm more okay with sharing my work in a public space like this, and I'm not going to throw up. So at the beginning, like I said, the projects that I started out making that I felt most passionate about and that were really true to what I really, really loved were things that I was making for myself and things that I was making for something that I was really interested in at the time, which at the beginning of my lettering career, artist career, was music. So in high school, I was really, really into bands, and I loved certain albums. It was like probably annoying to talk to about music, but the thing that I wanted to do was make art that was inspired by these albums that I loved. And I didn't have any formal art training, so at this point I was creating these pieces of work for myself without anyone's permission. And so the medium that I had to work with at the time was fabric and embroidery. My mom taught me how to sew pretty early on. It's a craft that has a lot of history in my family. And so these were like the materials that I had on hand, which was fabric and embroidery floss. And I applied them to these shirts and dresses that I was making for myself because I really wanted to celebrate the work that I really loved that these bands were making. And this felt like a natural way of doing it for myself. So when it came time to decide on what to major in for college, I went away to school in Ohio for fashion design. And when I was in fashion design school, I still was applying like band names and band artwork to my fashion school assignments. Like, can you guys even see? It's a motorcycle jacket that I sewed and has a Neon Bible album artwork on it, which I was super jazzed about, but my fashion professors were like, you're focusing too much on something that is pretty much like a finishing touch, this screen printed back. But this was what drove me in the first place to make this cool jacket. And I felt like it was important that I was staying in touch with the fact that I was driven to create on this topic that was music. And so in my dorm, in my free time, I was making these paper collage posters that were also inspired by bands that I liked. And this served as like an outlet that I created for myself to make this work that wasn't being assigned to me in school. And it also allowed me to have my first realization, as I sort of mentioned before, that if you're not being assigned your dream project at work, which is pretty unlikely, and you feel really driven to create something completely different in your free time, you should pay attention to that and continue to stay in touch with that with yourself and think critically about why that is and how you can work towards making those things in your work that you really feel like you're passionate about. So I think my awareness about that for myself allowed me to feel more confident about pursuing my first internship, which was at a gig poster shop. It's technically a graphic design internship, which like made my fashion advisor really mad because I should have done a fashion design internship. But because I knew I was making these things in my dorm and they were technically gig posters, works of graphic design, that I really wanted to pursue that and see what that was all about. So I did this internship at this graphic design shop and was able to solidify this decision to study graphic design instead of fashion design. So at that point, I was leaving Ohio, I was leaving this place that I had made all these friends, and at that point, I really was excited about the fact that I was shifting gears in this major way, and I was quitting fashion school and moving on to this new part of my life. So when I was doing that, I really wanted to keep in touch with the people who I had met there and share with them what was happening with me and start this communication with them to keep them involved in what I was doing moving forward. So the first thing that I did as I was kind of shifting gears was I sent out this piece of mail art to probably 100 or so people. And it was just a screen printed card with the same neon Bible artwork that I was like into at the time. So I sent this to people that were my friends and professors and things in Cincinnati that I wanted to keep in touch with, but then also sent it to people in Chicago that I was about to come back to and just update them what was going on. And this was directly inspired by a piece of mail that I got from my boyfriend about a year before we started to date. He sent probably around 200 pieces of mail that were all addressed in calligraphy to people that he wanted to update and talk to about what was going on in his life. And it was all very positive. It was just a piece of mail that was really, really nice to get in the mail that talked about the fact that he was graduating school and what he was focusing on. And this was really big for me. I had never really thought about people sending mail for any other reason besides like a thank you note or a Christmas card. And so when I recognized that I was really excited about a big shift that was happening in my life, I felt drawn to this idea of sharing with people in the form of mail, like he did. And also, when we parted ways and I moved to Chicago, he stayed in Ohio, we started to exchange mail with each other every day or so, which was a very organic thing for both of us, both because he had reached out to me with mail in the first place and because I was already making paper art. And this served as a very comfortable and safe place for me to practice my lettering and practice these little pieces of art that I was creating. And I like to encourage my students to realize that a lot of the time when you're trying to learn something new, you focus on what is the end result of someone practicing for years and years at a certain craft, and you don't realize that they had many years of some questionable practicing, but I gave myself a reason to consistently pull out my tools, which is really all you need to get better at a skill, is to incentivize your practice. And for me, this was this mail art that I was sending to Chris. And like I said, it was a very safe place. I mean, everything about it was very positive. When he was receiving it, it was like, good, you made this letter, it's so nice. And I was getting it back from him, it's nice. So that year, I sent out my first Valentine to my friends. It was inspired by something that an artist that I admire, Marion Banshees, does every year. She sends out big batches of Valentines. And I felt more confident about doing this and kind of opening up my circle of who I'm comfortable with sharing my work with, because I had been giving myself consistent practice doing it with Chris. So this first one that I sent was a screen printed card, definitely related to my gig poster shop experience. And then in the years that followed, I was able to have this nice outlet for trying out different art forms. Like in this case, it was paper cutting, and in future years, I did heat stamp, and this one was cut out of paper and then spray painted. And like, it's not perfect lettering, but nobody was receiving this and thinking anything other than like, this was a nice thing that somebody thought of me and thought to send me this thing, and no one was like looking at it and thinking that I should have like connected letters differently. So this was also like a safe environment for me to try out these new things and push myself to get better at my lettering. So Valentine's to people was a way for me to push my audience a little bit more. As I said in the beginning, I was only creating for myself, opened up that audience a little bit when I was sharing mail with Chris, and then that allowed me to get more confident about sharing my work with more people that I loved. So years after doing that, I tried to create more projects for myself that I would eventually share with the people that I admire and with my mentors. And this is absolutely terrifying, because when you admire someone's work, like say I would use Marian Banshees as an example. It's one thing to obsess over her work and trace certain things that she makes and try to learn about her process, but to make something that I know was inspired by her and then to send it to her and open up that door for her criticism is very scary, but pushing yourself to do that allows you to gain more confidence about sharing your work publicly. So the first way that I initiated a project for myself like this was with this Love of Letters piece, which I made for the illustrators and designers that helped me while I was an intern at Paper Source headquarters. I had a really great time. I think I was the first intern, and they sort of were like, oh no, what do we do with you? But they were all very patient, and I didn't know much about like vectorizing lettering, but I really wanted to learn, and they were really helpful. So when it came time for me to leave, I worked really hard on vectorizing this lettering, and took advantage of this opportunity to like send them this nice thing that also allowed me to keep honing my craft. So when I sent this to them, it was really well received. Again, like a pretty safe environment for trying something new, because people received it and they were like, thank you, this looks nice. And and that's nice that they said that. But I was proud of it, but hearing, sharing it with them and getting the opinions of people whose opinions really mattered to me allowed me to gain enough confidence to eventually submit this to a competition and to an open call for submissions for a book, which I don't think that I would have done had I not been like consistently pushing myself to share my work with a bigger and bigger audience. And regardless of whether or not I was in that book or won that competition, I think that this is really good practice for the years that followed, where I felt like it was more okay I could wrap my mind around sharing my work with like the people who I wanted to pursue a job with, or eventually like in an environment like this. So a few months after that, I sent out this piece of mail to the most people that I'd sent to date, or yeah, up until that point. So that year, instead of sending a Valentine, did I send a Valentine too? Yes, you did. All right. This was when I was graduating, and I wanted to send out something similar to what I had sent out to that small group of people who helped me at Paper Source, but I wanted to send it to everyone who had inspired me and supported me and been nice to me throughout my whole career. And so I sent out this thing probably to 300 or so people, and this was my regular list of Valentine recipients, plus 100 people that I admired the work of. I think I sent one to Kim, I sent one to Marian Banshees, and just like really put together something that I felt proud of sharing with someone. And I don't know if everyone can read it, but it says, "Thank you for endlessly inspiring me with your work. celebrate your accomplishments with this little print hand-pulled by Jenna Blazevich. And the print obviously says, smile and believe that you have made it. And I think that this maybe was a turning point in my career as a letterer, maybe because I chose this phrase as my sentiment to send out to everyone. And it was a little less sweet than Happy Valentine's Day. I'd been sending these things that, again, I've mentioned that they're very safe outlets for me trying some new things. And the sentiments for those cards was Happy Valentine's Day or I love you. Something you really can't argue with. It's very nice and sweet. And it's not that that the sentiment behind this isn't positive, but I opened up this opportunity for people to receive it and think that it was creepy or confusing. And I know in at least one situation somebody got it and they were like, what is this? Thanks for sending it, but what? Which is fine. I mean, I think I really needed to push myself in baby steps as well to doing that so that I could get to this point in my career where I'm creating work around sentiments that are maybe a little bit more polarizing. And that puts me in a situation where I have a smaller group of people who feel more connected with my work instead of everyone feeling semi-connected with the work. Because you can only feel so connected with a card that says Happy Valentine's Day. So this card that I sent out, I think, was an exercise for me to start to do that. And also, I sent this piece to an agency that I had expressed for years was my dream job, along with my portfolio. Probably the scariest thing that I've done in terms of sharing work with a group of people. And the agency is in Colorado. It's Moxie Sozo. And this is obviously this is an example of sharing work with people that you really admire. And I kind of, I psyched myself up for it. I didn't think about it too much, because if I would have, then I probably wouldn't have done it. But I sent them my work, and they ended up extending an offer for me to intern with them. And that is a direct payoff of consistently pushing yourself to share your work with people who you admire. And by working there, which, by the way, was why I was working for Nordstrom Rack, because the internship was unpaid. So which is not good, but in the months before that, I had to make some money. So yeah, Moxie Sozo, great experience. I was able to learn from the most incredibly talented people I've ever met. But what was more important with that experience was my ability to be in that environment and practice being self-aware and being in touch with what was really feeding me. And what I learned ultimately was that environment, although it was very inspiring, it wasn't really feeding what I really wanted to be doing as an artist. And I realized that I wanted to work on projects that had equal quality as the projects that they were putting out, but I wanted to be my own art director. And that ultimately led me to make the decision to launch Witchcraft. And there's also something very important about this period of time, because I used the opinions of my mentors and the people who I admire to help me solidify the decision to do this. And had I not been keeping in touch with the people from my past internships or from past years of school consistently throughout my whole career, I may not have been able to get as genuine of an opinion from them on whether or not I was ready to launch my business. But they were very familiar with where I was because I had consistently been sharing my work with all of them. So when I launched my business, it seemed very fitting for me to send out a big batch of mail art, and then that was around Valentine's Day, so I sent out this holographic foil print to probably 300, 350 people and agencies and design heroes, and then I sent it along with this card, which was that year's Valentine, that also had stuff about Witchcraft, and then an illustration from a piece that I worked on around Valentine's Day for Typeforce that year. So starting a business is definitely an invitation to having your work be viewed by the entire public, which is very intimidating. And this sort of experience with sharing my work with a community this large is intimidating as well, and you feel very vulnerable when you're in this position. But I think that through gradually opening up my audience of people who I felt comfortable with sharing my work with allowed me to work up into this point where I feel good about sharing my work with this group of people and with the entire public as Vichcraft. And so as I started to share my work publicly, I began to get reached out to about teaching workshops for calligraphy, which of course at the beginning I wasn't sure whether or not it was the right time and if I had the authority to work on these things, but people were telling me that they wanted to learn, and I felt that it was very important for me to pass along the things that I know now that I was in a position to. And when I thought about teaching them, I thought back to the first calligraphy workshop that I took from Molly Jakes. I'm still not sure about how to say her last name. But she taught this class, and she was very young when she first started out, and I just was really, this was when I was sending mail to Chris, so I'm like kind of using microns to imitate script, and like knew that I admired this sort of lettering, but I didn't really know how it was made. So I found her work, and she was doing modern calligraphy at the time, and she was hosting a workshop in Ann Arbor, and I drove from Chicago to take her class, which I realize now like definitely terrified her, because she was her first class that she was teaching. She was probably 25 or so, but she recognized that it meant a lot to me and to this whole group of people that she passed along this craft. And I was able to learn from her not only then, but she made an effort to keep in touch with her students afterwards and be accessible, and that's something that I really wanted to emulate when I started teaching my own classes. So this was an opportunity for me to pass along the craft of calligraphy, which immediately translates to keeping in touch with people and sending mail from a genuine place, but I also had the opportunity to keep in touch with my students afterwards and be accessible and be a part of a community. So you just saw, but I have postcards that I'm giving to everyone. I think you'll be getting them on your way out. And this is something that I wanted to pass along to everyone, and it's this opportunity to reach out to someone or reach back out to someone that you want to stay in touch with, or that you want to let them know that you admire them or you love them. Because for me, this was something that really pushed my career forward, and I think that everyone can share in that experience in their own way. Thank you. They said, can you talk about how feminism intersects with my design career? I sort of touched on it. How do you see it intersecting with the design community? Oh, with the design community? Either way. Okay. Yeah, I touched on it before, I guess, a tiny bit about how that one card that I made sort of like pushed me to keep making sure that the sentiments that I was lettering, once I was getting better at it and I felt like I could stand behind the actual, the quality of the lettering, that I started to push to apply my skills to sentiments that I actually thought meant something. And that's the opportunity that I have to make something meaningful that I can actually like get behind. Because a lot of the time, people see calligraphy and they think of something that's like sweet or romantic, and then the other thing is people see calligraphy and they want to like do something like completely on the opposite spectrum. Like calligraphuck is a thing that it's like these greeting cards that have like profane words, and that's like, I don't know, somewhere in the middle of there you can use lettering to really move people and get them to sit on a phrase or a sentiment, like girls to the front, hopefully. And that's my opportunity to do something. But as a community, I don't know, I think that it's important that like if you have the opportunity to apply what you are so like conscious about and what you're driven by to your work, that's how you create work that really is coming from somewhere genuine. Is that helpful? Okay. Because I'm working independently, how do I stay focused and like push?
Yeah, for the next thing, like
for the next thing.
Not stay stagnant.
I'm not sure if my answer is something that I really want people to do. Because currently, I mean, I'm still in the first couple of years of owning my business, and I take on probably too many projects at any given time to lead a healthy life. But I don't know. I'm trying to pay the bills and like make sure that I'm doing enough projects each month to keep myself alive, but I also want to use like almost all of my spare time to push to work on projects that are also like feeding me like creatively. And sometimes those are projects that don't pay very well or don't pay at all, or I'm initiating for myself, but that's super important for me. Like when I made the Greetings from Chicago piece that was on that Valentine, that was for Typeforce, and I had no, I didn't anticipate that would be bought by anyone. I just really felt driven to create on that topic and like use that environment and that community to like say something important. And that took, you know, like 100+ hours to make it, but that was, and it didn't, that's all that is to say, like I didn't make any money off of it, but I just really, really wanted to create on that and like use that opportunity. So I think like striving to continue to put myself in situations where I could create something that I think is really meaningful is how I try to do that for myself, and like working with other people that are doing something similar and reaching out to people that are doing something that I'm really proud of that they're creating, or they really inspire me. That's really important, and sometimes that when you're self-employed, you like forget to make time for that. Right? Is that good? All right. Okay. The question is like, if while I was doing lettering, if I ever had a point where I felt like I wasn't inspired by what I was doing anymore, or like confident about what I was doing, and how did I get myself out of it? Definitely there have been points while I've been pursuing like a career where I specialize in lettering, there have been points where I question whether or not there's like any room for me, because there already are so many talented people who specialize in lettering and create this amazing work. So at those points, it was really hard, because I would see the work that I was making and see that like it wasn't as good as my idols, or if it was as good as any of the people who I admired, like why was I like did I need to be making anything if it already was happening? So at those points, I tried to push myself to really like figure out what my own aesthetic was and figure out what was missing from that community and try to fill the void, which is very hard, because I mean it's a huge design, can be applied to anything, and you could be finding lettering. Yeah, it's been really hard. I guess like I've tried to like stay true to what I first started to, the types of projects that I was working on like at the very beginning, like the embroidered pieces and stuff, and I've always been really interested in work that's really over the top and obsessive and intricate. And so even though I'm able to work on less projects per year, maybe because they take me much longer, that's sort of like my aesthetic that I found for myself, and how I can wrap my mind around like being in this world that's like already full of so many people who are good at lettering. Does that make sense? He asked how I maintain balance between analog and digital. I think the nature of what I am like specializing in and what people are hiring me to do puts me in a position where I'm like pretty much required to work in analog mediums an equal amount of time as I'm working in digital mediums. But what I like to tell, try to like pass on to my students the craft of calligraphy, because it is an opportunity for you to start working with your hands and thinking in a different way, especially if you are on a screen all day. Was your question like, how do I balance it, or what?
Yeah, primarily how you balance it, or if you find, if you're ever in a position with client work or otherwise where you find it difficult to maintain balance.
I have to make sure that the humidity in our work is balanced, which makes for a dry place. And that's something, I mean, I don't know, like, to me it's very, it's like absolutely necessary. I have to travel around with all of my calligraphy tools and my paper and stuff, and that's the kind of work that I'm creating, both because I want to, and I'm like making these lettering pieces and posting them on Instagram just because I want to, and because the clients that I'm working with are asking me to create something that is done by hand. But I also have to figure out like how to use my phone as a scanner a lot of the time, because I have to put that into my computer somehow if I'm like, I'm trying to figure out how to like make this come full circle about how I keep a balance about it. I love working with my hands. So like I find reasons to, really. Like I guess a lot of the things that I'm making I could be working in Illustrator to make exclusively, but I love the feeling of thinking on paper first. And so I like kind of like require that of myself because I work better that way. How do I inspire myself to create for myself? Similar to like when I was working on those like band dresses and stuff, I loved their music and I wanted to like create in honor of like how moving their music was to me, and I just wanted to wear it for myself. And for the Girls to the Front shirt, for example, or like my patches and stuff, like that's just something I wanted to wear because I feel really inspired by the Riot Girl movement, and I was like, I want this shirt for myself, so I'm gonna work really hard on this lettering and make it so that I can wear it. Also, I'll see how it goes if I make some for other people. And that ended up being successful and like led me to like be inspired to make more products and things. But how do I create work for myself? Is that like, I mean, it all kind of relates to like being in touch with what actually is important to you. So if I started to like use my lettering to letter these sentiments that are like the lowest common denominator that I know everyone would love, you know, like cats, like, I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, if I did that, I wouldn't feel good about it anymore. Not because cats are bad, but like, because I would be like, well, why am I, you know, I feel, and I kind of mentioned a little bit before, like it makes me more excited to design for a niche, a smaller community that feels more excited about what I'm doing. That includes me too, you know. And so I have to create from like what drives me in the first place, and not try to be like, what would everyone like, you know? Because that's, you know, that wouldn't be something that I could get behind, because that probably already exists. What kind of, like now that I have a platform of sorts, like tiny but still one at all, how do I impact the community?
Or like, how would you want to, looking forward?
How would I want to? On a small scale, I guess, like continuing to apply my lettering skills to sentiments that like represent having a stance on some issue. That's important to me because that's work that I can be proud of creating. But also like contributing to the community where people are doing things like Allison's show that she's putting on February 8th. That's supporting a nonprofit that I think is doing great things. And even though I have like more projects on my plate than I like could even express, it's very important that I give time to those things, and when I have the opportunity to. And then, you know, when I'm creating a shirt that supports equality, to give a portion of those proceeds to a cause that feels the same way as me. And they're all small contributions, but I think that having that mentality now, while my platform is very tiny, that if I grow in the future, that those will still be things that I'm aiming to give back to. Is that sufficient? Okay. Thank you guys so much.